Thank you for joining us today. Happy New Year. I'm Keith Tebow, FRCMedia. The state legislative session has begun for the 2025-2026 session. And I'm pleased to be joined by our state senator, who's also former chair, possibly incoming chair of the Committee on Senate Ways and Means, Senator Michael Rodrigues. Senator, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it, as always.
Thank you for having me, Keith. It's great to see you. Happy New Year to you and your family. Happy New Year to the listening audience out there. And here we go, 2025. How many checks are you going to write and make a mistake?
Oh, I probably have already done it.
Yeah.
It's been a few days, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you, this is your 8th term as senator. Correct. Representing this district. Obviously, before that, you were state representative for the 8th district.
Correct.
Is the new legislative session still exciting for you?
It absolutely is. I'm still humbled every time that I enter the Senate chamber. I'm still honored every time I raise my hand and take the oath of office. This year, as you know, we got sworn in on actually New Year's Day because our Constitution requires or mandates that you get sworn in on the first Wednesday in January. Happened to be New Year's Day, so it was nice because Patty, my wife, was able to join me. Normally it's a work day,
right?
And for her these days, work day means grandma duty day because she's full-time grandma to my 2 grandchildren. So it was nice to have her there, and it's exciting. It's exciting for me always, but it's especially exciting to witness the new incoming senators or new incoming legislators generally, their family, their supporters. They work so hard to get to where they are, and to see that is always really special.
How many new members are there in the Senate this year?
3 new senators.
Okay.
We have I was going to say Senator-elect. They're no longer Senator-elect. They're full senators. We have Senator Kelly Dooner from Taunton.
Right. Replaced Mark Pacheco.
Replaced Mark Pacheco. We have Senator Will Driscoll from Milton, replacing Senator Walter Timilty. And we have Senator Dylan Fernandez from Falmouth and Plymouth, replacing Senator Sue Moran. So 3 new senators in the Senate.
And I believe I know at least one of them is a Republican. Are there 2
Kelly Dooner, Senator Kelly Dooner is a Republican from Taunton. The other 2 are Democrats.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want to get into a broader discussion a little bit later on about the state of Democrats based on last year's election, more nationally than regional. But I want to get into your role as senator. For the past 6 terms, you have served as the chair of the Senate Committee on Ways and Means. Even though that has not been officially discussed, your role this year, you expect that to happen again? I
would expect that to happen, yes. I'm proud that this current fiscal year, the FY25 fiscal year, was the 6th budget that I've written as chair of Senate Ways and Means that ties a record. Mm-hmm. We've already begun writing the FY26 budget. I can explain a little bit about that. Which would be a record 7th budget that I will serve as chair of Ways and Means. And I joked to you earlier, that I understand why the life expectancy of a Senate Ways and Means chair is 3, maybe 4 budgets. It's all consuming. There's no rest at Senate Ways and Means.
But I mean, it's not only budget, which I do want to get into, but it's also, just the shepherding of bills, right, on the floor. So it's not just the budget, even though that's a huge task.
The budget is but a bill.
Right.
The budget, the fiscal year's operating budget is a piece of legislation. It is a bill. But any piece of legislation that has a fiscal impact on the Commonwealth has to flow through Senate Ways and Means. Arguably, 95% of what we do has some sort of fiscal impact on the Commonwealth, so it does flow through Ways and Means. I have an amazing staff. I have a Senate Ways and Means Committee. It's the largest committee in the State House. It has a big staff. There are 11 fiscal analysts. Each fiscal analyst is responsible for a portfolio of accounts. One fiscal analyst, for instance, is higher education. And we've done so much there with free community college and everything in higher education. There's public health, there's public safety, there's the judiciary, so each analyst has a book of business, a portfolio. And we have the same on the other side of the House. There are 5 attorneys that work in Senate Ways and Means. Because we are writing laws and drafting laws, so we will have an idea and a goal, and we know what we want to get accomplished by a particular piece of legislation. but it takes our lawyers to actually write it into legalese and to make sure it's drafted to pass constitutional muster.
Right.
And again, each one of our 5 attorneys have their portfolio of accounts that they're responsible for.
Right. I want to talk about, what you've been able to, in your role as senator, regardless of your role in terms of a committee chair. You do have some seniority now in the Senate, right? I don't know where you rank. Do you know where you rank?
I don't know right up there.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know exactly.
But my point is
pretty high up.
But my point is that does benefit your district in terms of either getting money here or helping, put legislation through. It's a little different now because in your role, I know we've talked about this, you don't necessarily sponsor many bills because of, you sort of need to be a little more objective in terms of what gets through. But, talk about your success in being able to, I guess, deliver for your district over the years.
And that is the theme that I will be running into and carrying throughout the rest of the session for sure, is delivering for the district. Literally every day I wake up, go to work, and thinking what can I do in my role as senator in general, but chair of Ways and Means in particular, to deliver for my district, to ensure that the 185,000 constituents that I represent in the 7 communities that I represent get the resources, get the tools, that policy is crafted to benefit them and their families. And whether it's in economic development, the particular earmarks that we receive for the Flint, $7 million for the Flint Neighborhood Association, Flint Neighborhood Revitalization, whether it's the agricultural bills to support our farming, our fishing, and our cranberry industries that are so important to the Bristol and Plymouth County communities that I represent. Free community college, the fact that now every resident of the Commonwealth has the opportunity to attend our community college without tuition or fees. And we use the word free, but free just means somebody else pays for it because it's still expensive to run a community college. And that somebody else is we, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to ensure that we have that opportunity. Globally, a focus of ours in the Senate has been the competitiveness and the affordability of Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. We are witnessing a large number of people leaving Massachusetts because it is unaffordable. And the demographic that's most concerning of ours leaving are the 25 to 40-year-old. Young working families that, because of the cost of housing, because of the cost of higher education, because of the cost of living here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, are choosing to go move to North Carolina, to Alabama, to Florida, and the like. So we have, whether it was the Affordable Homes Act housing bill that we passed last year, the free community college, all of the additional resources we're providing in early education and care, child care, trying to address those issues to ensure that these young families stay here in Massachusetts. We need them.
And in terms of setting an agenda for the coming year, just to give some time frame, I'm speaking with the senator on January 3rd. So literally 2 days ago, he was inaugurated for another term. So there's a lot of still working parts before, I guess, the Senate is fully functional and fully moving forward. How much of a role is your job, but other senators' job, to work with the Senate president, who kinds of set, regardless of who that individual is, sets an agenda for that body for the session?
An immense role. I mean, we as a Senate convene in regular caucuses where we meet in the Senate President's suite. All of us, at least all the Democrats, we have a Democratic caucus, the Republicans caucus separately, and we talk about what our individual goals are and what we think should be the agenda of the Senate in general. And the Senate President does an amazing job of listening to everyone and incorporating those goals into our agenda. A big issue what we've heard on this year and what we hear from constituents is about transparency and openness. We're very proud in the Senate that we have always, at least under this Senate President, ensured that, for instance, every senator's committee votes are publicly posted so that you as a constituent know how I as a senator vote on any particular bills coming out of committee. We want to ensure that as bills get reported out of committee, it's not just a piece of legislation itself, but it's what's known as a summary. It takes the legalese and turns it into English so that anybody can read the summary and understand what the intent of a particular bill is. But it's our responsibility to communicate that to the Senate President. The Senate President is the leader of our body, of our institution, and the Senate President does articulate and set the agenda for the Senate in general.
A couple of items in terms of transparency. I was reading an article on the Senate President and her opening remarks a couple of days ago in State House News, talking about, in terms of transparency, that conference committees that I didn't know tend to be a little less transparent, at least the way it is now.
Right.
Is that an issue that could come up, that could change?
I think it's going to change a little bit. The confidentiality of a conference committee is imperative in ensuring that a conference committee actually gets done, right? We need to have the ability to have open, frank conversations with our fellow conferees without the people looking over our shoulder and second guessing and putting words in our mouth and everything we talk about. However, I think there are ways that we can be more open and transparent in that world, and that will be developed as we go. That's a kind of a new concept.
Yeah.
Generally, a conference committee, and I'm on lots of them, I'm the conference committee king in the Senate. We go into a conference committee, it's an open hearing. Somebody makes a motion, a member of the conference committee, usually it's the vice chair of one of the particular committees, makes a motion that we go into executive session, and we immediately jump into executive session. I think we'd like to open it up a little bit before we will go into executive session. Before we go into executive session, to maybe outline the differences between the two particular bills we're looking to conference. The budget obviously is the big one, right? That's the big one, but there are also lots of other conference committees. I was a conferee on the economic development bill that dragged on for months. Again, a very complicated $800 million, almost $1 billion bill that we conferenced. I think we can do a better job there, and I'm hoping we do a better job there.
The other issue of transparency is, of course, the ballot question 1, which passed, the auditor having the ability to audit the legislature.
Right.
She talks about transparency within both chambers of the legislature. Do you expect, or do you know if there's going to be any more battle? I mean, it was the will of the voters.
We do audit. The legislature is audited. Both the House and Senate hire independent auditors to audit but we have accounts. The Senate has an account. The House has an account. Those accounts are audited, and it's public and it's posted. I think, there's a pesky little document called the Constitution that when it was drafted over 300 years ago, they made it clear, the drafters of the Massachusetts Constitution made it clear that there's got to be a separation of powers, that we cannot let all of the power reside in one set of hands, whether it's the legislature, whether it's the executive branch, whether it's the judicial branch. So there is a legitimate question on the constitutionality of some of the components of question 1. I think you'll see the state Senate again lead in being open and transparent. But one thing about audits, and anybody out there that's been audited by the IRS or by the Department of Revenue, you know that it's important that the auditor is independent and objective, that the auditor does not have a predetermined agenda going after you for something, right? So that's going to continue. That drama will continue, and there are some folks that like the drama and some folks that get political benefit by having drama. And if you know me, one of my mantras is no drama. Yeah, we don't need drama. We're all in this together. We work very collaboratively and cooperatively in the Senate. My ranking minority member of the Senate is currently, and I hope it remains, Senator Patrick O'Connor, a Republican senator from Weymouth, is literally one of my best friends, and he sits in on every one of our meetings and has and he'll tell you this, a full, open, participatory role in the Senate Committee on Ways and Means.
Yeah. All right, shift gears now to budget, to money.
Yes.
Spending people's money. I know we've had this discussion yearly. We've had a conversation and about budgets. Wasn't too long ago that I'll use the word, the state was flush with revenue.
We were.
Following COVID and ARPA funds and the
Yep.
case may be. I remember talking to you last year when we were talking about FY 2025, and you said it's starting to go the other way.
Yep.
You know, the flush amount of money may be coming to an end. How do you characterize as you prepare for fiscal year 26?
Yes, so fiscal year 25, our current fiscal year, was certainly a transition year where we, all the federal dollars, keep this in mind, over 400 million federal dollars flowed into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. 400 billion, I'm sorry.
I was going to say,
400 billion with a B. 400 billion federal dollars flowed into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts during the COVID years. In every way, shape, and form, employers, the business community, got so-called PPP grants.
I remember that.
You know, tens of billions of dollars in grants to our local businesses so they can keep their doors open. Employees, those that were laid off, got supplemental unemployment insurance benefits for months, almost a year in supplemental unemployment insurance benefits. Towns got ARPA dollars, and schools got ESSER dollars. Bristol Community College received a lot of federal dollars. So all that money flowed into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and a portion thereof filtered its way through the economy and ended up in our state's tax coffers, right? And we were seeing 6-8% revenue growth year over year. We are now back to the more traditional 2 to 3%, 4% revenue growth. So we've have to learn to adjust. 25 was a year of transition. We didn't know exactly where we were going to level out and stabilize. We've got that down now. We know where we are. We have a stable base of which to build. So FY26, we just reached consensus with the House and the administration. We're going to build our FY26 budget on a 2.25% revenue increase for FY26. Still a revenue increase. We're not in a recession. It's not revenue decrease. But that's about $1.2 billion, $1.4 billion new tax dollars for the Commonwealth. Mass Health alone is slated to increase over $2 billion. We have an aging population in Massachusetts. It is a known fact that 95% of all health care dollars are spent on individuals' last 5% of their life, right? Long-term care, nursing homes, very expensive, right? But a critical service that we provide for the Commonwealth. Home care, we made record increases in our home care budget last year to ensure that our elders and seniors can age at their home. Visiting nurses, food, the like, coming to help folks age at home. Even with that increase that we appropriated in FY25, we're hearing they're going to run into a deficit this year that we're going to have to address. So it's going to be a tough fiscal year, FY26. It is one we will navigate. It is one that we've navigated these before. A challenge for me and a challenge for my partner. And I have to give a shout out to Chair Aaron Mikowitz, the chair of the House Committee on Ways and Means, because he's been by my side through these 6 budgets and probably will be for the 7th. We have a challenge of member management. We have a lot of members, new senators that have been elected since the last economic slowdown, that have only been there during the flush, robust times. Right. Now it's going to be, I'm sorry, we can't,
A lot of it's going to be education to them.
Education, right? And setting a standard and setting the parameters going in.
People, as you know, don't like to pay more in taxes, and when they see spending, they will ask the question. I'll ask you the question.
Yep.
A lot of times during budget session, there's a lot of talk about trying to increase revenue to meet the spending.
Right.
How much of it is, hey, we got to cut some spending?
A lot of it. We have not increased any tax. Matter of fact, last session, this past session, we passed the largest tax cut package in the history of Massachusetts. That
was in fiscal year 24, correct?
It was in calendar year 24, but it was this last session.
Correct.
23-24 session.
Right.
Yeah, so this session, and those tax cuts are rolling in currently. We, for instance, doubled the estate tax exemption. We increased our child and dependent care tax credit to the highest in the country. I was at the lead, before I was Ways and Means Chair, I was Chair of the Committee on Revenue, which is a politically correct word to say taxes. We call it revenue, right, because we don't like the T word. But we changed our child care tax deduction to a child care tax credit. Those tax nerds in the world, like me, budget nerds, know that it is a big difference between a tax deduction and a tax credit. Mm-hmm. This year, in this tax package, we increased that tax credit to the largest in the country. Again, focusing on affordability and competitiveness, because it's very expensive to provide child care in Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You know, we've increased the number of child care vouchers, we've increased supports and subsidies for our child care providers, and we've also put more money into the pockets of the parents that are trying to raise these children. So we have quite the opposite. We've balanced up. We haven't raised any taxes or any fees or any revenue. We've ensured that in order to balance the budget, we had some reserves, that we could use money out of our reserves, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's cutting spending.
How long can the state tap into those reserves until?
Not much longer.
Okay.
Not much longer. So, as you rightly mentioned, during COVID, revenues were robust. Massachusetts saw record amounts of revenues coming into its accounts. So what did we do with that money, right? We did a couple things. One is we spent some. We spent some addressing the realities of the pandemic, whether it was housing instability or food insecurity or more money for childcare or more money for our schools to ensure that they have the ability to provide remote learning. So we spent money. We also saved a lot of money. And we saved money in two ways. One, in our traditional savings account, the so-called rainy day fund, the stabilization fund. When I was appointed chair of Ways and Means in February of 2019, the stabilization fund stood at $1.9 billion, about 7% of our operating budget at the time. Our goal was to get it to the gold standard of 10% of our operating budget. I can tell you today, our stabilization fund stands at about $9 billion, or about 17% of our operating budget. So we have a very healthy, sizable savings account. Then we had all these ARPA dollars, and we were able to, and it was working with Governor Baker at the time that we did this, we were able to get very creative in utilizing ARPA dollars to pay for expenses that heretofore were paid with state dollars. So we took those savings and created what's called a transitional escrow account, like a savings account to a savings account, right? The transitional escrow is a more fluid account. In other words, it's easier to tap into to spend for known deficiencies. If and when we ever tap into our stabilization account in order to balance the budget, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be, people are going to talk about it.
Right.
And by people, I mean Wall Street.
Right.
I'm also very proud that last session, I don't know if it was calendar year 24 or 23, but last session, Massachusetts saw its first bond rating increase in over 20 years. So Massachusetts now has a AA+ bond rating, the highest in its history. Why is that important? Because when we go out and borrow money, when we do transportation bond bills to build roads or bridges, when we go education bond bills to build schools or, make investments in education, we borrow money, we pay interest.
Right.
There's a carrying cost for that. The better bond rating, the lower your interest rate. So we're very, very proud of that.
All right, I want to get into a couple of other, quick things. Quickly, how will any potential changes in leadership on the federal level, with President-elect Trump coming in a few weeks, how could that potentially impact money coming into the Commonwealth?
It could have great impact. So our largest source of revenue in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is our state taxes, right? The income tax, primarily sales tax. Second is federal reimbursement. For instance, Mass Health, the largest line item in the budget, is reimbursed close to 50% from federal Medicare dollars. So any changes in Medicare reimbursement could have a drastic effect on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in one of two ways. Either it's going to cost us a lot more money to provide the services, or we're going to have to reduce the level of services that we provide. So we are monitoring it closely. No one's going to speculate. We survived so-called Trump 1.
Right.
You know, I'm sure we will survive so-called Trump 2, but it could have drastic effects on the Commonwealth.
I want to talk a little briefly about education funding. I know the Senate President talked about looking at the funding formula, especially when it comes to the Student Opportunity Act.
Yep.
Coming toward the end of
Right.
that has greatly benefited cities like Fall River. Do you expect any changes there? And then I guess, you know, in connection, we're at Bristol Community College. We've Mass Educate, Mass Reconnect.
Right.
Do you expect those initiatives to continue?
Short answer is yes to both. So the Student Opportunity Act was passed 6 years ago now, and we had a 7-year plan to fully fund the new financial requirements of the Student Opportunity Act. The legislature has met that for the first 6 years and will meet it for the 7th year. I can promise you that the Student Opportunity Act will be fully funded. But then where do we go from there? It's a very complicated formula of how state tax dollars are distributed to individual communities and towns. Westport, Somerset, Swansea does not get the same reimbursement formula as the New Bedfords, Taunton's, or Fall Rivers of the world. So how are those dollars distributed? It's going to take a while to look at, and the Senate President made it clear that she wants to begin looking at that now. As far as higher ed goes, we've made major commitments to higher education, especially our community colleges, and those will continue. The other challenge that she laid down the gauntlet in her speech is career and technical education, so-called vocational schools. Right. We are going to make additional investments in career and technical education, whether it's additional money to our vocational schools like Diamond Voc, or additional investments in our comprehensive high schools like Durfee, that is providing technical-based education in their schools. If you go through to the new Durfee, you'll see they have career and technical areas. So education is the number one priority of the legislature, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, or now early education and care. It'll remain that way.
You know, I mentioned earlier, I wanted to ask you your thoughts about the state of Democrats in Massachusetts. You know, a lot more people that voted in November. Obviously, the legislature is still heavily Democratic in terms of both chambers, in terms of the majority.
Right.
Although there were some messages given here in Fall River. The city
Right.
voted for President-elect Trump.
Right.
How do you see that? And is there some soul searching that needs to be done within the party, as you can see, that, you know, may play an impact moving forward?
Yeah, a lot of that discussion and that move was really driven from national, federal agenda, not state agenda. I think, you know, the Massachusetts legislature has its fingers on the pulse of what's important to our local constituents. I think that we, the state legislature, needs to do a better job of bragging and talking about the great things we did in economic development, in housing, you know, in climate change, in K through 12 education, in early education and care for childcare. I don't think we do a good enough job of really explaining the impacts of the policy and decisions that we've made and how it positively impacts the citizens that we represent. So I think we need to do a better job. And I think, you know, the immigrant situation, the migrant situation certainly plays a big role in that. You know, and that's a crisis. That's a situation that's not going away. It's one that's we're going to address early on in the session. But there's silver linings out there. The fact that record number of these migrants are now workforce. That's all I hear. Everyone that comes into Senate Ways and Means conference room that's representing some business or industry, irregardless of the industry segment, could be higher ed, could be the hospitality industry, could be the service industry, could be the healthcare industry, could be the building trade industry. They all come through my office and they all say the same thing. Workforce, workforce, workforce. We need help. We need help.
People.
We need people. Well, we have thousands of people that have just entered this state that are now getting put to work in the workforce, and we're hearing great results from, especially the areas. Southeastern Mass hasn't seen a large number of migrants here, but in the areas where it has, Salem, for instance, Salem has a large number of migrants residing in Salem. Salem State Hospital, for the first time in 20 years, is fully staffed. And the why, how, is from these newly arrived migrants. I think one of the frustrating things in that discussion is the misrepresentation of these migrants as illegal immigrants. These are legal, asylum-seeking, documented families. They're not illegal, and they can work, and we need to put them to work. It's the federal government who's responsible for immigration policy that declared these individuals legal, that aren't providing us the tools, the work permits and stuff to get through the Federal Department of Labor quick enough. But we've turned that corner. But it's still going to be hotly debated. It's easy to bash immigrants. Yep.
Senator Rodrigues, as always, I appreciate your time. It's good to catch up, and I'm sure we'll catch up throughout the year. I appreciate it.
Whenever you need me. Very good to see you. Happy New Year again, Keith. Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year.
Thank you for joining us here on FRC Media. Have a great day.